truth etched into the soil. Where there is no water, there is no life. Give water, and the villages will make India capable. This vision fueled the Dalakia Foundation. Mission River permanently revived over 164 water bodies, conserving 36 billion liters. The groundwater table is rising, ending scarcity. Simultaneously, through Mission 10-2030, we're planting for tomorrow. Over 3.6 million trees restoring biodiversity and nurturing habitats. This is the result. Agricultural productivity doubled. The burden on women eased. It's driving reverse migration and bringing life back home. Nature follows a rule. Whenever we support nature and nourish nature, nature gives it back. Dalakia Foundation, nurturing nature, empowering communities.
Well, hopefully, yeah, let's hear it. So hopefully that's set the scene a little bit for people. I'll do a bit more of that in a moment. I think the first thing to say is thanks so much for coming back after the break. I know it's been a really long day, and you've had so much content today. But in some ways, I think this is, it's apt that we're in Paris for what is, in our view at least, the most important panel of the day on a really important topic. And just on that, just briefly, so 10 years ago at COP21, we're all aware was the Paris Agreement that was made. And I think it's worth just reflecting a little bit on that. I think we're all aware that we haven't made as much progress as we need to or we'd like to. But at the same time, something like 2/3 of new energy demand has come from renewables. And there are quite a few examples of countries and industries and people and organizations that have made a huge difference, and clearly we need to do more. But we have come a long way. But just one fact, of the 195 countries who agreed targets back in 2015 in this city, only 4 have met them. So there's a huge amount more that needs to be done. And this panel is focusing on that topic from the perspective of jewellery. So there's quite a lot on this slide, but just to set the scene for what we're going to discuss today, we want to focus on practical tools and frameworks because quite often we have conversations about ESG which are maybe focused on action, but what we want to do is leave people with some really practical tools that they can take away with them or find out about afterwards to help your organization, your company to make progress. And we've got a few examples of those, plus also the framework for a whole range of tools that are now available either from CIBJO or from the Watch and Jewellery Initiative or from other stakeholders in the jewellery industry. What we'd like to do is offer some insight, some challenge, and hopefully inspire companies and organizations to take action on ESG. So we have a very experienced and prestigious panel, as you can see. I won't go through all of this in detail, but we have myself. I run Key & Co, which is a global advisory business. Sandra from Fronselclat, Wesley, you're all sitting in a slightly different order, but Wesley from De Beers, Francesca from Kering, Helen, who I've worked with at Key & Co on the tools that we'll talk about today. John Mulligan, who's dialed in. John, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Excellent. The technology is working. And then Iris, who most of you will know from the Watch and Jewellery Initiative. So I just wanted to briefly just set the scene on what's happened over the last year, really, since the last Congress in this area. So let's start with progress. And this is China, where some of you will have been in Shanghai at the Congress last year. This is a 26 megawatt giant offshore wind turbine. It's the largest one in the world, and it's taller than a 60-story building. One unit alone can power 55,000 homes a year, and China is already providing half of global offshore wind capacity, with more than 1,400 gigawatts of wind and solar now installed. And it's actually smashed its green target. It's hit its 2030 target already. This is Australia. There's lots of colours on this chart. The yellow is solar energy. The green is wind energy. There's some imports in purple. And there's some battery in blue. And this is a week-long period in Adelaide in Australia, which was entirely powered by renewable energy. And there are lots and lots of examples of this. We had a 3-week period, I think, in the UK. We turned off coal in the UK. And most countries in the world have either regions or periods of time where everything is being generated by renewables. So there is some good news in this area and huge progress. But on the flip side, there has been some slowing of momentum or changing in momentum, and some reality checks. So in Europe, some of the key ESG regulations around CSRD, CSDDD, have either been delayed or softened under political pressure from countries such as Germany and France in Europe, but also businesses who are challenged with making progress on ESG. So there's been some watering down of regulation. And globally, as we all know, divisions have sharpened. So in the US, we've all heard the phrase drill, baby, drill. The International Maritime Organization, so I work in shipping as well as jewellery, 2 weeks ago, they postponed their carbon tax. Would have been the first global industry to introduce a carbon tax, and they've postponed it by a year at the bequest of Trump and the Saudis. And there are several other examples of this globally. But actually, although tariffs and ESG regulations have been shifting and changing, the world is adapting. So imports from China to the US are down by something like 30%, but exports from China are up 8%. So what that demonstrates is the world finds a way of making progress, doing the right thing, growing, and in this instance, making progress on ESG, despite some of the challenges. And at the end of the day, the underlying issues are still there, and the science is unchanging. So 2024 was the hottest year ever recorded. It was about 1.55 degrees centigrade warmer than pre-industrial levels, which are something like 13 degrees average. That famous 1.5 degrees has been exceeded. And the impacts are everywhere. So this is Spain. I was up in Scotland in the UK over the summer, and on one of my runs literally stumbled across a bushfire. I was on holiday in Greece, more bushfires. We can all see the impact of climate change already. So we have this momentum and progress, but we also have setbacks. And what that means for all industries, including ours, is there are both challenges and opportunities. And as a trade association, CIBJO can play a powerful role. So while it can't force companies to adopt ESG practices, it can help with tools for the industry, which can help which can help drive action in ESG. So there's lots of swings and roundabouts there. Some progress, some falling back. just as a straw poll, could you put your hand up if your focus on ESG has increased over the last year? So there's a few. Stayed the same? Okay, I'd say that's probably the majority. Decreased? 1 or 2. So that's not as bad as I thought it might be, but it's suggesting that progress is still being made. We need to do more, and somewhat encouraging that there are a few of you who have increased their focus on ESG. With all of that and that backdrop, what I'd like to do is just turn to John first, and please go easy on John. I think there's an 8-hour time difference with, is it Hong Kong where you are, John? So it's Thailand. It's the middle of the night for John. But John, just with all that in mind, could you just give your sense of what's happened to ESG expectations over the last year or so?
Thank you. And hello again. It's sorry not to be there in person. Very much missing it, missing Congress. I'm actually in Kyoto in Japan, and it is approaching 1 o'clock in the morning here. So if I'm not quite as sharp as I could be, apologies. I think there's a couple of kind of counter trends, if you like. I think you mentioned the headwinds, you mentioned the obstacles, and I think there is an element of changing some of the language around those expectations, how we articulate our ambitions and how we express them, how we describe them. And I think so that means the conversation is changing. That said, and you've already alluded to it or mentioned it, the science and the facts remain the same. So in many cases, the actual response, the plans, the actions or potential actions remain the same. It's just the way that we talk about them, I suspect, has changed a little. And it really depends on where you are in the world. So again, there's a thing there's a point when we talk about expectations, is the expected response, and then there is broader societal expectations. And so I think, and we should also be mindful of that, the enduring need for sectors, businesses to respond. They may just need to talk about it in a different way. And so that for me has been a kind of one of the shifts, how we actually describe what we do when we're talking to certain audiences in certain contexts.
Great, thanks, John. And I guess the most extreme example of that is greenhushing, where there are a lot of companies in the US who are actually doing things and making progress, but for one reason or another, one in particular, they don't like to talk about it in the way that they maybe used to.
So John, I'll just to quickly mention on that, in New York in Climate Week, I think it's worth mentioning that I was there, and I was there the previous year. Actually, this year I think people have adopted a kind of a realistic pragmatism even within the US, and actually there was a kind of almost a more coherent sense of commitment in New York, given the fact that they're aware that, again, like I say, that there may be some pushback, but that the whole kind of US context has made people probably even more determined to act in a concerted manner.
Thanks, John. Iris, how does it look from your perspective?
I'm very much aligned with John. Actually, what I also saw in Climate Week, there was an important survey from the Global Compact, the largest sustainability initiative in the world across all industries, where I think it was approximately 85% of CEOs said that they acknowledge that the business case for sustainability has never been so relevant, but they're not talking about it. So they don't want to talk about it. So I think the good news is, and I'm a slightly optimist as a personality, is that sustainability used to be quite isolated and often disconnected from the business. Today, sustainability is really about business resilience. And I think if we think about all the disasters we see, if we think about heat waves, if we think about all the climate changes, if we think about droughts, this is having an impact actually on business resilience. Cocoa prices going up 300%, olive 50%, insurances of houses, insurance of buildings, Dubai Mall under the water. My point is it's becoming a reality for CEOs, so it's at their risk level. What is important for us in the industry is that we need to see that sustainability becomes truly integrated across all the business functions. And I think that's the good news. It should not be the loneliness of the sustainability manager. We really need to think about from sourcing to procurement to that integrated approach. That's how we need to move the needle. So I'm not so pessimistic on it. And I really reiterate the sentiment I had at Climate Week, because I thought, should I even go really in this pessimistic landscape? But I actually saw a lot of goodwill and willingness to action, but also because there's a business case. We will pay the price. Nature is talking and nature is actioning, and that we cannot avoid.
Yeah, and I think there's a short-term, immediate business case that goes back to the AI panel, actually. So all these data centers that ultimately the US wants to build, that that will help fuel Trump's economy, that will go through the tech bros. They need these data centers now, and the only way to build data centers quickly is actually with renewable energy, given the network connectivity challenges and the challenges with fossil fuels. So actually, the whole thing is probably going quite full circle. And renewable energy in the US is becoming quite an important topic, whether that's nuclear or solar or offshore wind. And that will be on the president's table, actually. He doesn't really have any other options. So, no. Wesley, how does it look like from your perspective?
I think I have got an element of caution, and I think the element of caution is that I think there is a widening of the gap between those companies which are moving forward from a sustainability perspective, but I think the change in political leadership in the US has ultimately also given the chance for those who are already not committed and not moving on that journey to continue to not move on that journey. So I think it's great to see the determination of those companies moving on the sustainability journey, but we have to be very well aware that there are many companies who are choosing not to do it, and there are many people who say, who cares about ESG anymore? And I meet many people personally who say that to me. So I think we have to make sure that we are trying to bring everyone on that journey.
So you have this widening gap between the pioneers and...
Unfortunately.
And I guess this is relatively, or very much a self-selected audience. This is not a representative audience, so we should take that into account. Helen, anything to add to those comments?
Yes, I would add two things. One, that given that we are now operating in a completely different trade environment, ESG has never been easy to do, but we're now being asked to do much more with less. So the time constraints, the resource capacity constraints, those things are now even harder to do, but are not stopping what is happening in many instances. But for a practitioner point of view, that is getting harder. I think the other thing on the expectations front is that the need to prove business value from sustainable ESG and sustainability practices is growing enormously. And the expectation is that you need hard numbers to back that up. So investors and businesses alike are expecting to see tangible evidence of progress. And that's where data comes in.
So that's a good segue, I think, into some of the barriers and challenges. This is tough. I'm guessing that in the room, people and your organizations are coming up against some of these barriers. Here's a few of them. If people are experiencing barriers to taking action on ESG, who's experiencing that first one? It's too complex. Okay, that's good. I don't know where to start. And this may not be you, it could be your colleagues in your organization. What's the first step that I take? I've got limited resources or tools. There's a few hands, so we'll come back to that one. Cash challenges or lack of a business case. You can't justify it. There's limited cash in the business. Yep, there's a few hands up. Conflicting priorities, particularly for smaller companies. There's so many other things going on. Yeah, lots of you. And I guess there's lots of other things as well. So there are lots of barriers to taking action on ESG. We're going to focus today on C, the tools, and limited resources. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to turn to Iris again briefly, just to talk about some of the specific barriers, Iris, that you're encountering from the perspective of the Watch and Jewellery Initiative.
Yeah, and I don't have my glasses with me, so I actually can't even read my slide. First of all, at the heart of our industry are the SMEs. You know, actually, our industry, it's family business, it's the heart. So we need to really help them build tools. And I think I've been 22 years in this space. We were very much formed by social justice, right? The initial start was with the best practices from the bears on the social side, labor, health and safety. Then in 2005, with the Responsible Jewelry Council, we actually built a robust standard across different elements of sustainability. But now it's becoming even more advanced to science. So when we think about nature, climate, and all these topics, you actually need technical expertise. So it's becoming much more burdensome. Second, legislation. I think when CSDDD, which we've been working on and kind of talking and engaging with policymakers, we were quite clear in the direction. Now Omnibus comes, we have continuous contact with policymakers. It's not yet clear yet, even though I think it's good that the pace for the SMEs is slowing down. That's a plus, I think, from Omnibus. But the direction seems to be still going on double materiality. Fantastic. But the reality is you need to get the SMEs in if you need a truly valuable supply chain. I think also collaboration. We talked about it, but genuine collaboration. And that means is we need to all put our egos down. And if one organization has a great tool, let's build on it, let's reference it. I want to give the example of working with France Éclat. It is a possibility to really work together with organizations to build stronger systems and have more an alignment. And I think that's what we're also trying to do with the initiative, is really being complementary, but also having some front runners that are going further and deeper into the supply chain and building those tools that we can also scale for other organizations. But SMEs are definitely a priority for us, and I'm really proud to see we're doing a fantastic SME pathway with suppliers. And with humility, we want to learn from it, see how we can do better, and then hopefully we can scale it open source. But you see, I mean, this is not a surprise, I think. These are, for us, some of the big challenges we see.
Yeah, and I guess what you're saying is you don't underestimate these challenges, that they're really tough. Right? It's really hard for SMEs, and the collaboration point is very deep-seated in this sector.
Yeah, and one point I wanted to make, I think it's becoming so administrative for SMEs with, you know, checklists and another checklist and another checklist. You don't build capacity. What we need to do is really help SMEs build capacity and management systems that it also strengthens their internal system. So they don't only do it for commercial contract with a brand or for someone else. It has to have, what you say, Helen, real value for their own resilience and business continuity.
And I guess you've pinpointed there quite a number of capabilities and skills. And so I wanted to turn to Francesca just to talk about gaps, challenges, barriers around training and capabilities.
So thank you, and good evening, everyone. I just would like to add a point, because we have seen in the previous chart that the different topics a company has to go through are many. This topic is complicated, but I do believe that we have a very important word that could help all of us, is first education, and second collaboration. Because even a big group like our, which is I work at Kering, and needs some time to rely on other hands. For example, we have here CIBJO, we have here the Watch and Jewellery Initiative, which have developed and delivered important tools that we still use, even if we have a huge team in the sustainability division. But also another point that I strongly believe it's crucial is linked to the young generation. How can we attract those generation? How can we let them fall in love with what we do? We have courses at universities which are teaching sustainability in jewelry? Very few. Do we have courses in universities which are teaching business in jewelry? Very few. So what we are missing is the collaboration between experts in sustainability, experts in business, and young talent to be embedded immediately in the companies, to sit down with the CEO and listen to the CEO and say, okay, I have a problem, I have to sell this, this, and this, but I have to listen to the young generation needs. How can you help me?
Excellent. And just to highlight the importance of this next generation, there's some interesting Bain & Company research out recently, which looked at the number of actions that consumers are taking around ESG. And counterintuitively, the older generations are taking more actions on ESG than the younger generations, which is surprising perhaps, because it always felt like it was the younger generations that persuaded the older generations around the time of the Paris conference to take action. And there are some very famous examples of that. Actually, it seems to have flipped the other way. So this younger generation and educating them is more important than ever. Helen, anything to add on challenges before we get into the tools?
There is still so picking up on the point about education and collaboration, we need more leadership in this space, and there is still a disconnect between what is happening in terms of ESG and sustainable business practices, activities that are taking place within a business, and the executive oversight of those activities. So I regularly see that ESG just simply is not appearing on the board agenda, or whatever that most senior level of oversight is within small businesses. It's just not appearing. And I ask every company I work with, if you have 15 minutes with your board or that level of oversight, what would you want to talk about? And the answer invariably is, it never comes up. I just don't get asked. And that needs to change.
Iris, did you have to add something to that?
But then we're already talking about often bigger companies, Helen, with already stronger governance mechanisms. I think also the beauty of our industry, it's all family businesses, but the purpose of a family business is actually to bring it to the next generation. And I think that's where also the industry probably has a unique opportunity to educate also on evolving governance models, also for SMEs to be, like you say, fit for purpose, and to take it as part of a priority of really business resilience. And one point I also wanted to come back to on Francesca is, okay, for example, circularity. And we've been doing research on circularity in the industry for watches and jewelry. Very challenging. While we look at fashion, where they are a decade more advanced than us. If we want young designers to rethink from the start how to create, we need a complete different thinking in education. So my point is, there's a huge need today in the industry to, get fit for purpose.
Great. So we're going to come back to some of those challenges, including that last one, and share some of the tools with the audience that address those. Before we do that, given everything we've talked about so far, another question for the audience: do you feel like you and your companies have the tools that you need to address ESG, either for your own company or for your customers or for your supply chain? Who feels you've got the tools that you need to do that? And who doesn't? And for those of you that feel like you have the tools already, would you like more? Yeah, thumbs up, 2 thumbs up over there. So that's what we're going to turn to now. John will explain there's a very large number of tools available. We can't go into all of them. But perhaps, John, you could just set the scene for us a little bit and talk through the role that CIBJO plays a little bit, and some of the other groups, and what those tools are, before we dive into some of the specific tools.
Sure, thanks, John. And I think Francesca mentioned the kind of key aspects of education and collaboration, and pretty much everything I'm going to speak about hopefully reflects that. I'd like to talk about CIBJO first and foremost, and CIBJO's journey from focusing on initially responsible sourcing. So the Responsible Sourcing Commission produced some of the documents you see at the top of the list. And that is because responsible sourcing is foundational. It's basically, first of all, how you start to look at the risks within your supply chain, and then how you respond to them in a established, formalized manner of due diligence. And there's some, very well established foundational frameworks in place that represent how both regulators and stakeholders expect you to manage that. So the first document that CIBJO produced in this field was the Responsible Sourcing Blue Book, and that was 2018. However, CIBJO recognized, as did the rest, I think, of the sustainability community and stakeholders, that we need to look beyond our direct business, beyond the gates, and consider wider impacts. So where we are now is the Sustainable Development Commission, which is built on the Responsible Sourcing Commission and its materials, has reviewed and revised that responsible sourcing material. And so there will be a revised, updated Blue Book. There will be an updated toolkit, and the toolkit is basically how to guide you step by step through responsible sourcing. But part of that review has then reflected that the world has changed and expectations have changed since 2018, 2019. And we're now looking wider. We're looking at the issues you mentioned. We often captured under this umbrella term ESG, or even more broadly under the sustainability agenda. And so we're also going to be, CIBJO's Sustainable Development Commission is also going to be publishing early in the new year, I hope, a fairly comprehensive reference guide, an ESG and sustainability reference guide for the whole jewelry industry. And that tries to seeks to lay out the kind of a broad agenda, but in some detail, both at a level of detail that allows you to learn, understand, build capacity, but also that then links to other materials. And so this is where the collaboration comes in. It then links to the materials that have been produced by others, the Watch and Jewellery Initiative included, so that we start to build a cross-reference ecosystem of resources. It means that basically go to one place and you should be able to be directed to another place. Now, additionally to that, we've already got a range of complementary tools. Tools is the term you've been using, John. And we have the ESG wheel and its implementation guide. And I think it's fair to say that they are increasingly tailored to SMEs. Iris has mentioned the importance of SMEs. Coming soon, we will have the Double Materiality Assessment Guide. And for those of you who aren't familiar with materiality assessment, I think we're going to be touching upon that in a second. And increasingly, as I say, you start to have both the foundations, the reference materials to allow you to understand and build capacity, and then you have the tools to implement. And so that, I think, is where CIBJO is rapidly moving towards. I think we've already got some solid materials in place, but very soon we should have this range of both foundational materials and implementation tools and guides. As I say, there is already a lot in place. Iris knows very well that all of us say we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we do need to be coherent and aligned in our materials. And the more we can cross-reference them, the better. And I think Iris is going to touch upon that in a second. So, John, back to you.
Great, thanks for that, John. That was a really good overview of the tools. And as you can see from the list, there are lots of them. And I think the only thing I would add actually is there might be other tools that your organisation has developed or is using. It's a great way to help others to make progress, to share those tools, either with CIBJO, with John. Just make us aware of them, because it might be that there's something out there that could help other organisations as well as yours. So we're going to look at 4 of those tools. Panel, I think we said sort of 5 or 6 minutes per tool. We might need to just make sure it's closer to 5 than 6, if that's okay. Okay. But let's start with Iris. I can do this.
Okay. So because people can get the slides, I think the philosophy of the initiative has always been actually 3 pathways. First, companies need to be educated, like Francesca says, and education is not just sitting in front of a screen and listening, but really having the opportunity to engage, to learn, but also to have help desk support. And we do this on human rights, we do this on climate, we do this on nature, because we want companies to feel confident enough to build their own roadmaps, because we don't believe they should be dependent on one organization like ours. They should be able to develop their strategy. So we've done this very much on human rights, because I think human rights is the essence of our industry. And if we think about the past 20 years, if we had issues in the industry, often the element of human rights has still been a priority on the agenda. So human rights is key. If you can go to the next one. Nature. So nature is very new for many people, and was also a topic that honestly, John, I had to kind of dive myself into, because I've always been an activist on social justice. But nature, the reality is that nature is slowly coming into many legislations. And you could say, I'm a small company, I will not be involved. You will be involved. Because if you have commercial agreements with European brands, at a certain point, they will ask you questions about business resilience and nature. So we actually started from scratch. We started on a nature playbook education for anyone who had never heard about nature. Then we looked at the legislation. They went through a 6-month pathway, and we've digitalized everything. And I think that's very important, that we have a complete technology solution with technology that 10 of the top banks of the world use, because you can imagine data transparency, GDPR, etc., antitrust. And we are now very happy. We launched it at the World Economic Forum in Davos in January, and we have actually 65 companies up and running that are doing all their work on climate, on nature, and inclusiveness. And I don't know the third example that I put in there, because it's been a while, sorry. Next slide. No, this is the Impact Action Journey Framework. So this is where it all comes together. So actually we have an online tool where companies of any size can step in with questions and guidance. And I think it's very important. The guidance is not just WGI 2030 guidance, it's actually the operationalization of legislation. And the technology is so advanced that if changes happen in policies, we can actually adapt pretty much real time. And so we've been testing the waters with some top brands, SMEs, and it's now fully going live. Well, it's live. It's been 6 months we're working on it. We're doing an update in December, and we'll be able to share our first progress at Watches and Wonders next year on operationalization. My point is, companies need tools, so they need practical education, they need help desk, because if they have technical questions, they need a safe space to not feel, oh, I don't know how to do this, to have guidance. Third, we should not reinvent the wheel, so we should really operationalize that companies are compliant, and then they can show their impact. And through this tool, they have an internal management tool, they are aligned with regulations, and they build up capacity. And that was really what we're trying to achieve, with humility, complementary with others. And then something I'm particularly proud of is our collaboration with CIBJO and John Mulligan, who has been instrumental with the Global Compact, where we have started to have our solutions lab that soon will be accessible for the whole industry on education models, on supply chain, on risks in the supply chain, on tools, really integrating that all to help companies advance, but particularly SMEs.
Great. You rose to the challenge of the 4 minutes. Well done. And if people in the room or people who are watching want to get involved or use the tools or help with the effort, what should they do? Contact you and your team?
Absolutely. My team is in the audience. Please raise your hand. I have 3 fantastic musketeers. So my point is, reach out to us. I think, we do not want to reinvent the wheel. So if today France Éclat is working on something, I would say I use France Éclat, I build on it. If the Responsible Jewellery Council is building a certain tool, I will use it, build on it. I think the strength will be in the unity, the consistency, helping companies also be compliant, because the risk is our companies will not even be compliant in the very challenging legal environment we are.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Iris.
You can find those online.
So now turn to Francesca. So perhaps you want to pick up, Francesca, on the challenges that you mentioned earlier, and your particular award.
Yes, so I would like to start from the name of this panel, which is Turning Principles into Practice. I would like to change it into turning principles into actions. Because if we want to speed up things, we have to act. And this is a picture of the first edition of the Caring Generation Award for Jewellery that we launched last November. And the picture you see here is the award ceremony of the event we held in Las Vegas. This is an international competition with under the scientific direction of Politecnico di Milano, thanks to a collaboration with CIBJO and our dear brands here in the room, so Boucheron, Quilin, and Pomellato. What was the aim? The aim was to use innovation as a driver to speed up sustainability integration into the transformation. Why? First, because we do believe in young generation, and thanks to the collaboration with the best 10 universities in the world offering courses in sustainability and jewelry, so very vertical and very rare, I have to say. It was not easy to find, to scout them. And the partnership with startups already active in jewelry. We had only 22 startups. And when I say only, let me tell you that only was really an hard job, because this format for our industry is still far, but they are the real vehicle for integration and the vehicle to move the needle. Because thanks, for example, we have scouted a startup in China who's using broken stones. We all know that for us, broken stones are a problem. So they have been able to reuse those broken stones thanks to, not precious, but they have been able to integrate the use of broken stones thanks to new techniques. And so now we are evaluating how can we use those techniques and bring those techniques also in the high-end jewelry. It's a journey. Is not easy, but this was a clear examples on how to turn practices and to the high schools. So how can we integrate the young minds into a business which is traditional by definition? How can we use innovation to speed up the problems we have and the challenges we see every day? So this is just an example, because of course we have many other activities we develop with our brands at group level, but collaboration is key. So we were not able to do it without the universities, without CIBJO, without the startups. They told us we are alone. Yep. How can you help us? And so we gave them spotlight.
And if there's a startup out there today or watching online, or who attended the AI panel and has some wacky AI idea and they want to enter the award next year, what do they do?
Contact me on LinkedIn, and I would be much more than happy to involve all of you in our next edition that will happen in 2026. Excellent.
Thanks, Francesca. So I realise you haven't said anything yet, Sandra. I'm so sorry, but now is your chance. So, Sandra, perhaps you could talk a little bit about the life cycle thinking work that you guys have been doing.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm an environmental scientist and mainly working on an environmental assessment method that is named life cycle assessment. With life cycle assessment, you can do environmental life cycle assessment, social life cycle assessment, and life cycle costing. So you have all the sustainability pillars part of. Well, I do environmental life cycle assessment, and it's a tool that's really helpful to know the impacts on the environment through all the value chain of the project. We focus on the product. It's ISO standards. In fact, we have 2 standards using this methodology. And you have to know your value chain. So sometimes it's a bit difficult because you have to know what is the journey of your product you're going to sell, and at the end you will have an impact for your product from the beginning, the extraction phase, to the end of life, even if in jewelry we don't really have an end of life, but we change the user, so it goes in another life cycle. So it's a whole life cycle thinking you have to go through. And at each step of this value chain, through this analysis, you do have to define the different impacts on the environment. So here, for example, you have some schemes on 5 different impact categories, environmental impact categories. You have climate change, use of non-renewable resources, use of land. Well, you have in fact, 15 different impact categories. It might be on the next slides. So you have, here is the mainly used right now impact categories. And you have climate change, for sure, it's a reference for us. But you also have global impact, like ozone depletion, for example, or if you use nuclear, you will have the impact category, ionizing radiation might be useful for you to know the impacts. And you have local impacts also. For example, acidification, eutrophication, and we do evaluate also everything around toxicity, so human toxicity and nature toxicity. Well, we name it ecotoxicity, so you have terrestrial ecotoxicity, freshwater ecotoxicity, well, those different impacts. So at each step of the value chain, thanks to the life cycle assessment method, we are able to define the impact on those different compartments of the environment, those 15 impact categories. So it gives quite a lot of information for the decision maker and for companies to take decisions thanks to those results. So for example, here it's just an example of how to do the work. So you have to define your whole value chain. So ask your supplier where does the product he's selling you comes from and how is it produced, and ask your supplier to ask his suppliers and everything else. You have to go all through the value chain. And can you go back to the first, previous slides, please? Yes, so thanks to this, you will be able to know perfectly your value chain, and at each step of the value chain, you have to define for each process what is emitted to the air, to the soil, to the water. I mean molecules. I'm a scientist, so I'm a bit sometimes too much, but we do have to look at each molecules emitted, and also each materials or energy consumed. For example, my process uses some energy. Where does my energy is coming from? How many kilowatt hours, for example, do I need to do my process and to finally have my product made? So we have to involve all the value chain actors here.
Great, thanks, Sandra. And I guess not every company will have a Sandra, but will be as fortunate enough to have a Sandra that can be the pioneer in this kind of work. But and it's very thorough and detailed work, isn't it?
Yes, it's a lot of work. So how can
other people get involved or learn from it?
No,
so they should contact.
Just kidding, but at France Éclat, we are doing a working group with the actors of the sector, the jewelry sector, and also with the Watch and Jewelry initiative. We're trying to help people doing those life cycle assessments. and we try to define reference values. So it means for people who don't have time, who don't know exactly their value chain. For example, for a diamond, we could give values on, for example, the polishing. Cutting, polishing, we can give a numbers, impacts, so with the 15 different results I show you. And at the end, it would really help defining where are my impacts, at which step of the value chain. Is the product, my product, better than the one that is a reference? And how can I eco-design it? How can I improve my results?
Excellent. Just quickly, if you can.
I want to applaud her work. I think it's very important. Sometimes you have rock stars in the industry, so she's a rock star.
I'd second that, yeah.
She's a front runner. It's always difficult to be a front runner. Second, I think we need to realize this is such important work. That's why the initiative is also investing quite substantially in this topic, because at a certain point, you know, product passports, impact claims. On Thursday, we have in Paris here at Caring a green claim a seminar. You cannot make substantiated claims if you don't have this information. Yep. So people can think, you know, we don't need to start thinking about it. We should, and that's why we want to anticipate and support the industry in this work.
And I think Helen will pick that up in terms of this being a really critical step in a double materiality assessment. So if you don't do this bit well, then everything else follows in the DMA. So that's probably a good segue. Just quick time check. I think you're still okay with the 5 minutes, guys, but if you can try and keep to that, please.
Okay. So CIBJO has been working on a tool called a double materiality assessment tool. It sits within a group of tools that John Mulligan's just talked about. So I won't go into detail at this stage about how it all fits together, but hopefully this slide gives you some information. The point being that these tools are mutually compatible and that they reference each other. So they are not, you know, the point of these tools is to enable action to be taken. And we know that there is a gap between intention and execution. And so we need these tools, and we need every business to be using these tools. You can't work in sustainability and ESG without coming across the term materiality. I wish when I started 8 years ago, this tool existed then. But basically, you know, in a nutshell, if you are, in my experience, companies usually struggle as they move from intention to execution to get a complete picture of the impacts, risks, and opportunities in their complete value chain. So beyond their own operations and through their business relationships. And secondly, to embed those ESG activities that they choose to invest in and to action into business strategy. And lastly, to focus. So ESG is a full body workout. And therefore, it is absolutely vital to focus the limited resources, the limited time, and the limited amount of money that businesses have, particularly small businesses, on the areas that are going to deliver the most value. And a double materiality assessment is one tool that helps you address those three challenges in one, and in a structured and relatively easy way. So if I can have the next
Yeah, sure. So what we've tried to do is focus this on SMEs and simplify it, right, Helen?
That's right. So before I go into that, just let me just take a moment to address what is materiality, because it is a concept that will come up again and again as companies start to work more and more on sustainability. It is actually a concept that's existed for quite a long time. It exists in legislation, both in the US and in the EU and in the UK. We have chosen to focus on double materiality because it provides a dual lens of helping businesses identify and assess the impacts, risks, and opportunities of their business operations and those in their full value chain, upstream and downstream. So it's an inside-out view of what a business does and how it impacts stakeholders. And the second view is financial materiality, which is how do sustainability topics impact your business's financial health, whether that's cash flow, whether that's access to capital or revenue and so on. So that is the dual aspect of materiality: impact materiality, the inside-out view; financial materiality, the outside-in view. And this is a simplified, structured process for small businesses, but it does include some additional guidance for large organizations to conduct this 7-step process in a matter of hours to address those 3 challenges that I talked about previously. So it is a foundational step that businesses can take as they start to build out their ESG strategy and implementation activities.
Great, thanks, Helen. So Wesley is going to help bring this to life a little bit for a smaller organisation.
Hi everyone. So I just thought we're going to go slightly low tech. So I think it's quite ironic that we're following the AI talk, because I'm actually going to try and give you a bit of an idea of what I did to try and use one of the CIBJO tools, just so that if you are a new business or a SME wanting to start this, what does it look like? So I think that the key thing from my perspective, and the reason for the slide on the screen at the moment, is we have to be well aware that many companies are cash strapped at the moment. We don't have money just to spend on different elements. And whatever we were doing, I really felt it was important that this work would either produce cost savings or cost very little or be cost neutral, because ultimately people don't have a lot of money to throw around at the moment. And I felt that was really important. The other thing, and just to describe our own situation, I work in a business unit which doesn't have a sustainability team. We didn't have anyone who even represented sustainability. So I took up the mantle to actually do that myself. And I thought, what's the best thing that we can do? It was actually to use the tools that we developed in CIBJO to show what that would be like to do that. So I'm just going to try and take you through an example of what that is. I think, like most and many people, I was not a sustainability expert, and 2 years ago I really felt intimidated by this whole world. So I'm now going to just take you on a little journey about how I moved forward, and hopefully this might be useful for a few of you as well. So John, if you could. So the first thing that I realized is that when you're talking about ESG, particularly internally, people are either rolling their eyes or they're interested. And the most important thing for me was actually to be able to explain to people why I am working on this ESG. And it was quite fundamentally important to me to realize that if you look at the research, either from a profitability perspective, from a revenue perspective, or from a valuation perspective, ESG is ultimately good for your business. So whenever anyone would challenge me to say, why are you using ESG? Why are you doing this work? I needed to have that retort immediately so people understood why it was important for us to do this work. And this was a slide which Helen shared in January, which I use and use every day whenever I'm talking to people about ESG. So the next slide is ultimately something which many of you will have seen before. And this was the wheel that we developed 2 years ago. And what was the aim for this wheel? It was to include all of the different areas of sustainability on one page. And for those of you who don't know what it is, there's 14 principles which all link into sustainability. But if you look around the outside of that particular slide, John, if you could go back one. It actually links directly into the UN sustainability goals as well. So what we needed to do is be familiar with this and how do we use this to go through our journey. So John, if you could go on to the next slide. So this was the guide which was published in January, and it was a 10-step process. The materiality element, which Helen mentioned earlier, is one part of this. But the first thing that we needed to do is, if you were an SME, what did you need to do? First, you needed to nominate someone to be responsible for it. Who was going to take up that mantle to do that? Then you had to be familiar with the 14 principles that I just touched on, all relatively simple and on one page. The other thing that you needed to do was discover what are your priorities within your business. And that was ultimately where the materiality matrix came in. 6 months ago, I didn't even know what a materiality matrix was. And every time a sustainability person mentioned, I was just confused. So I'm going to show you what I actually did, and hopefully this will help you understand what one is. So if you look on the left-hand side of this particular 3x3 chart, it says it's got key stakeholder importance. On the bottom part of this, it says what's important to your particular business. Then what I did was take all of those 14 principles and prioritize them into this ultimate materiality matrix. So if you look at the top right-hand corner of this particular chart, they are ultimately the most important aspects within sustainability that we need to look at from our business. So if you're starting this journey, this is the most important thing that you need to do, because you're prioritizing what you should work on for your business to improve your business. So if John, you go to the next one. Then what we did was actually, within those 14 principles, the work that Helen, John, and ourselves did earlier this year was to say, within each one of those areas, what metrics could we ultimately look at ourselves? And I wanted to keep this extremely simple. So if you look at this page, it looks quite complicated, and this relates to responsible sourcing, which is one of those 14 principles. But if you look at this page, there's a whole load of options in terms of what metric you could choose for your particular business. And I just wanted to choose one metric for each of the priority areas. I did not want to make this complicated. I wanted to start, how do you move on this journey and feel as though you're moving productively? So if you look at responsible sourcing, the element that I really wanted, sorry John, if you just go back one, it's just the materials and the product elements that we needed to trace on a monthly basis. And that's in terms of our suppliers, how many of them were responsibly sourcing and what percentage of that. So a very simple measure that we could do on a monthly basis to try and evaluate exactly where our suppliers are from a responsible sourcing perspective. And then last but not least, then we ultimately put this into a diagram which listed all of the priority areas on the left-hand side that you can see there. And for each particular one, we established what is the plan for sourcing the information to then measure that particular metric that I just mentioned to you. So ultimately, we've got 9 priority areas, we've got 9 metrics, and then we've got a plan to ultimately do that. So it's a simple action plan. Again, this is pretty low tech. All you need is Microsoft Office to do it. And so what I felt, and really the next slide, is just ultimately, and I'm conscious of time.
That's the last one.
Oh, you didn't include it. Okay. So ultimately, from our perspective, there was one element in terms of where you did. It's pressing the wrong button. So I think ultimately a year ago, before I went through this journey, I was interested and I really wanted to be involved in sustainability. But ultimately, I had my running gear on, but I wasn't going anywhere. I was watching everyone else go past and was ultimately quite intimidated by the sustainability area and what it ultimately meant for me. If you move on to the next one, this is sort of how I feel now. And in the UK, we have something called the Couch to 5K, which is ultimately trying to get up from your couch and start running and start moving forward. And this is ultimately a little bit of where I feel now. I sit amongst some incredible sustainability experts, so I won't quite get to Usain Bolt yet, but I feel as though by at least taking pragmatic steps, doing it in the most low-tech way possible, I can start to move on this journey. And after doing this for the last 9 months to a year, I feel as though I can actually now sit amongst sustainability experts and talk with them about the challenges that we face. So I hope that's of use to a few of you out there. And of course, like John said, if you want to have some experience of doing this yourself, just please feel free to reach out to me. Thanks, John.
Great. Thanks, Wes. We've taken most of our time during that panel to focus on the tools, which I think is exactly what we wanted to do. We've gone a little bit over, so what I'll try and do is wrap up relatively quickly now, but I would like to just close the loop a little bit on, from the people in the room who've been listening to this. We've tried to give you a flavour of the tools. You've seen there's lots of them, and you've heard one example in some detail. Rhetorical question, this one really, but if people would like to get more involved in working on these tools, using them, contributing to the effort, just please come and see us afterwards. We can continue the conversation. the most important thing here is that people are collaborating and thinking about those barriers that we talked about before. So there are a lot of SMEs out there. There are a lot of companies in the value chain who find this, like Wesley. They are on the couch, like Wesley was, and they find this stuff intimidating. The industry makes this really difficult for companies. I've been in the same situation with my small business, and they seem to do everything they can to make this topic feel disinteresting, difficult, cumbersome, but it's really important, and most companies want to make a difference. So the concept behind the tools is to help take that first step. So keep that question in mind. I just want to finish really with John, actually. If we can just get your thoughts on what the road ahead looks like. Just give the audience a bit of a flavour for where these tools go now, and in particular with the 100th anniversary year in mind, so fast forwarding to 2026 in Vicenza.
Okay, thanks, and I'll keep it very brief. Several of the key aspects of the progress that we've made have already been commented on. First of all, we have the tools, and so next year, in 2026, the question is, how do we make the most of those tools, and how do we make them, as several people have said, integrated, aligned, easily accessible? So a lot of next year, frankly, will be pulling things together, looking at cross-referencing, how to make them available, published online, referencing each other, and then a campaign, if you like, of awareness. And so I remember last time when we were in Vicenza, one of our panelists was hearing us say the same thing and wasn't aware of any of this. So the question is, how do we ensure that that doesn't happen again? So communication awareness is key. And whenever you have these resources and tools, you need engagement. You need people to start to use them, to give you feedback. That's how they evolve. These are all, if you like, I think we all agree, working reference points. So that's kind of, for me, if when we get to Vicenza, hopefully we will get to a point where we can take stock, we can review where we are. It'll be great if we could actually demonstrate that they're being used, and hopefully, I'm an optimist, we can celebrate our progress. So that, I think, is the road to 2026 from a very high level.
Great. Thanks a lot, John. Just to finish then, we started with some of the progress that's been made in ESG, the challenges, the wobbles maybe in the last year that a lot of us have been conscious of and thinking about, and then reflecting on the fundamentals. So in a sense, nothing's really changed in terms of the importance of doing this. And it's not just about avoiding that bottom right-hand picture. As we've talked about a little bit, it's also about driving value for your company or for your organization. It's about getting more customers. Very often, in 25% of cases, in fact, according to a recent survey, there's a positive ROI on this stuff. So if you can prioritize and focus on things that are important, whether that's nature or whether it's emissions or whether it's the life cycle, if you can find the things that are important to your business and your customers, then it isn't just a box-ticking exercise. You can make a difference to your business, your bottom line, over the next 12 months. Thanks so much. I know we've gone over. You guys have taken in so much information over the course of the day, so thanks so much to those of you who've stayed behind, and let's continue the conversation over dinner.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. John,
Yes.
I don't know if you want to join us for dinner tonight, but you have to be there, in maximum 1 hour and 15 minutes. I don't know how long it takes from Tokyo to come over to Paris, but if you are not able to come because the taxi is not so fast, in this case, we will miss you tremendously. Thank you very much.
I would happily join you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.